Jews are compared to a tree. Just like the sap is the life force of the tree, and by rising it causes it to blossom and fulfill its purpose, so the soul is the life force of the Jewish people, and through it they fulfill their divine mission. Over the years, Jews have been attacked from many quarters. Sometimes the object of attack has been their bodies. On other occasions, their souls. This is history, but it's still happening today.
All the first believers in Jesus were Jewish. And the problem was, how can a Gentile believe in Jesus? For 2,000 years, our people have not even been allowed to consider Yeshua. They've been told that if you become a believer in the Messiah, you are Meshumad, you're a traitor, you're an apostate. But I would say this, what could be more Jewish than finding the God of Israel through the Messiah of Israel?
At the end of September, I lost my mother. And shortly after this, I received a letter of introduction, which I didn't want to take up at the time, from somebody called Lynn Pulvermacher, who was a Hebrew Christian. I saw no harm in it at the time, so I replied to the letter. She rang me up, and she came to see me. And she kept talking about the Jews have got it all wrong, that Jesus was the Messiah, and that what she had found through joining the Hebrew Christians and what her aim is, which is to convert Jews to Christianity, but for them to still remain as Jews. What I feel is that she must have had some very, very detailed information on me, almost as though she'd studied a file and had discovered that I'm divorced, disabled, a single parent with 2 children, lonely, and had lost my mother, and she felt that I was a very, very susceptible person to warm friendship, and that would have made me, in her eyes, a very easy target.
How can God be one? How can God be three? Who is Yeshua? Is he the Messiah? Is he just a good teacher? Is he just a good rabbi?
Targeting is what it's all about, but effective targeting needs good training. What level of training do missionaries active in Britain receive?
I have been trained in the School of Hard Knocks. I've studied books. I've had friends. Some people have come to believe in Yeshua, some haven't. We do not program people.
I went for a week of training. They were having 3 weeks, 1 week of training, then 2 weeks going out into the streets and trying to convert people. But I said that I didn't want to do the 2 weeks, and they knew that I wouldn't want to do that, but they said come along and just have the week of learning. So I went along to that, and they teach you why they believe Jesus is the Messiah, all the prophecies that they believe Jesus has fulfilled. And they explain why and what to say to Jewish people when you meet them on the streets. And they tell you objections that Jewish people might bring up or what you can say against them. And you know, you do acting out a situation in the streets where you meet a Jewish person, you try and convert them. Everyone's classified into 4 groups, either JB, UJ, GB or UG, which stands for Jewish believer, unsaved Jew, Gentile believer, or unsaved Gentile.
Over 40 organizations distribute literature in this country. Most of these publications are on Jewish themes, and it's often impossible to tell from the front covers that one's being given a missionary tract.
Are we being deceptive? That's what you're saying?
Yes, I mean, it is a bait, and the inside is a hook. This is the bait, right? Yeah. And inside is the hook. Correct?
I've never been asked this question, so I'm having to think about it. I suppose that it is a message that is a Jewish message. It's relevant to Jewish people. So Jewish people will notice it.
Right. My question is, why don't you put a cross as well as a Star of David? Here.
You know that's an impossible question. What you're asking us, we are communicating a message.
Well, you do here. I mean, here you say the Juif pour Jésus. So it's quite clear.
Because
But
the cross is not to Jewish people the real message of Jesus.
Isn't it?
The cross is a sign of persecution. The cross is a sign of forced conversion.
Yes,
We
but the
do not
cross-
believe in it.
The cross or its message is in here.
Also, the cross is not truly Jewish, it's not truly messianic. It's a symbol that was taken up by a paganized form of Christianity. We're
why-
told that
why do you have it
Yeshua
here?
died on a tree.
But then why do you have it on your t-shirt? I just
Well, firstly you tell me why don't you have it there, and then you tell me why
Yes.
do you have it here. I
Exactly.
don't think you're being fair.
No, I just want to understand the contradiction. It seems a contradiction to me. You either have it everywhere
It's
or
a
you don't have
paradox.
it anywhere.
It's a paradox and it's a symbol.
But it's the paradox of your choice to put it here and not here. So explain to me why.
I didn't write that one.
The most tragic case involving a Jew trapped by missionaries is that of Benjamin Lesser, a young student driven to suicide by the constant harassment he received. His parents tell the story.
Well, I believe that they became very friendly with him. He was a student by himself in London, don't forget, and he didn't know a lot of people. It was his first year, so he was by himself. So they became very friendly with him. He was invited to various parties. I know of a Hanukkah party he was invited to. And I believe they made a great fuss of him. And they tried to get him to bring other people into the church as well. They baptized him. But besides all this, they consistently kept in touch with him. They got him to pray at night and go to all kinds of meetings at night. They were obviously brainwashing him so that he would become Christian. You see, the whole idea of the missionaries, to begin with, was for him to keep his Judaism, but to recognize Jesus as the Messiah. So this was the terrible part of it, that they split him in two, because you can't be Jewish and Christian at the same time. It just isn't possible.
He was home during the Easter holidays, and we then realized that he was really ill. He was laughing one minute and then getting very, very upset the next, telling us, quoting from various books of the Bible, both Old and New Testament, and my wife and myself, we realized then that something really was amiss.
During the next 2 terms, Benjamin's mental state got steadily worse, and he had to be admitted to hospital to be treated for depression. The missionaries didn't ease off the pressure, even during this time.
One visited him in hospital. I always forget names.
Yes, I can't remember that. But this was in spite of the fact that we went to see them, a married couple whose name, I forget how we got their name, but we did. Went to see them and pleaded with them to leave him alone, which they promised to do. And afterwards, we found out that they had still been visiting him.
And also they wrote to him, and they said that he should ignore his parents and follow the path of Jesus.
After 7 weeks, he left hospital, and it seemed his mental health was improving. He even got a job as a swimming bath attendant. Then, a day never to be forgotten.
I came home from school, and there was a phone call from the swimming baths to say that he hadn't turned up. Then the next thing, he phoned my husband, and they had a short conversation on the phone. He'd probably try to get me, and I was at school, I don't know. Then I think we both panicked. He told you where he was, didn't he?
He told me that he was speaking from Worcester and that he wasn't coming home that night.
Mm.
And when I asked him why, he said, "Dad, I just can't face it." I said, "What is there to face?"
All right. Fine. All right. And we searched and searched and we couldn't find him. And it was in the middle of the night, the police came and said that Benji had taken himself to a railway line and he'd put himself in front of a train and he let the train run over him. We have his Jerusalem, we have his belt from Jerusalem with that's really all we've got intact of him left.
The death of a Jewish boy, a tragedy which started with what appeared to be a friendly invitation to a Hanukkah party.
It was a way to be friendly with him. It was organised by the Christian ministry to the Jews, and they organised these Hanukkah parties and Purim parties, I believe, as well, and they would invite young Jews there, be friendly to them, and push Christianity.
The Anglican Church's ministry amongst the Jews, which still organises parties like the one attended by Benjamin Lesser, is very active in its efforts to convert Jews. They are the driving force behind most missionaries in Britain.
Yes, I personally work with an old society of the Church of England called the Church's Ministry Among the Jews. The patron of CMJ is the Archbishop of York, and the director is Reverend Joss Drummond.
The General Director of the CMJ is the Reverend Walter Barker, whose job it is to maintain contact with over 1,000 parishes in this country. Parishes like Edgware, with a large Jewish population, where the vicar, the Reverend Gordon Bennett, shows a keen interest in his Jewish neighbours.
And while it's the Christian Easter, it's also the Jewish Passover. After all, half of my parish is Jewish, and I have a responsibility to help anyone who lives in my parish to know about Jesus. So yes, I've knocked on Jewish doors, and I'm usually wear my dog collar and say I'm a Christian minister. May I talk to you about Jesus Christ?
Missionary publications are glossy and carefully planned, like this book, first published with a cross and reprinted later with a less obvious cover.
There are over 40 organisations with thousands of leaflets and publications, all very professionally produced and using the very latest techniques in marketing and advertising. Also recently we've seen a marked increase in their activities concentrated specifically in Jewish areas. Today they are even lobbying the less or non-evangelistic Christian groups, telling them in leaflets like this the reason or justification for missionizing amongst the Jews. They're also in leaflets like this one saying specifically how to go about this missionizing activity and whom to contact. In other words, what they're really saying that it's absolutely necessary to missionize. And then following it up with these leaflets with precise instructions how to do so. I'm also very concerned at the strategies employed by some of these groups who make a point of approaching young people, those who are away from their families, like students, taking advantage of their loneliness and possible isolation. People who are either physically or mentally disabled, people who are lying ill in hospital. I even know of two cases where people have been approached on their deathbeds. And of course, the approaches to children.
We have a code of conduct where we say that we do not approach anyone under the age of 18. We do not use all the methods that we are accused of doing.
My brother and I were walking out of the school, and a missionary came over to us and gave us leaflets and started speaking to us about the missionaries and about Jesus. And so then we started walking away slowly, and he asked me if I believed in God. So I said yes. And then he asked me, do I believe in Jesus? So I said no. And then we started walking away slowly, and he went to my brother and asked him
if I've been in heaven. I said yes. He asked me what I saw, so I said I saw lots of rooms. So he said, did you see Jesus there? So I said no. And then he gave us a balloon each, and it had something about Jesus on, so when on the way home we popped them.
Universities, too, are fertile ground for the missionaries. Key members of some Christian unions have spent their long summer holidays in Israel being trained in how to convert Jews. Campuses quite often have well-organized evangelistic missions, and Jewish students are prime targets.
First Friday night meal I went to, the first person I bumped into was a Christian who joined the Jewish Society and was there at the Friday night meal. And immediately we got into conversation. We had the most wonderful conversation. I could really relate to him, and he really appealed to everything, my sensibilities, everything. We just got on terribly well. And I hadn't found that yet with a Jewish person. I could sit and talk about what my lack of religiousness, yet my belief in God.
And what happened after that?
Well, after that, he told me that it was his burden to set Jews on the path towards Christianity, and he drew it in a very glorified light, and he made it sound terribly, terribly emotionally appealing. That was one of the most important things that struck me. It was emotionally appealing, very dramatic. I was studying drama at the time, so things like that appealed to me. I actually felt suddenly like I was on a guilt trip, because there's this guy who's praying for me to convert, and I'm sitting there and he's saying, look, you've got to come to some sort of decision. You know, you're wavering the whole time. And I think that was what I felt. I think a lot of people feel the first time at university, you're very vulnerable. You're looking for something, you're not searching anymore for your identity, but you're looking for something to identify with. So because you're so insecure at that stage, you'll grab onto anything that seems stronger than yourself. And when you get somebody who's sitting there who's terribly genuine and really believes in himself and what he's saying, you can't help but be drawn into it. You know, it's just understandable.
So how should one react to a missionary approach?
The first thing is to realize, if one's going to be approached, that the person who's coming up to you and speaking to you is somebody who has undergone at least 4 or 5 months training. They have practiced for hours and hours and hours how to approach people, what to say, if challenged, what to do. You have not had that practice. So what is happening is not a meeting of minds. It's a meeting of a professional missionary against an unsuspecting person. And my advice is to be polite, be very straight, and to say, I'm not interested in what you have to discuss. Thank you very much, and to leave it at that. That is firstly and foremost the best reaction. For those who are more involved or want to be more involved, certainly who want to inform themselves more, Operation Judaism has just produced this fact pack, which is very difficult to produce something which will cover every eventuality. But we've split this into sections. It has a general introduction to the problem. It goes into specific proof texts, because these are the things which are normally thrown at people. Unless you've actually read them beforehand, you're completely disarmed by it. And then general essays, and also some reference books at the back. There is absolutely nothing that any missionary can produce that Judaism doesn't have a very clear answer to. By the same token, there is absolutely nothing that Christianity has to offer a Jewish person that Judaism doesn't have 50 times more to offer.
Christian missionaries are motivated both by the passion of their belief that salvation can only be attained through faith in Jesus, and by the challenge presented by the descendants of those Jews who rejected Jesus in his time, still remaining unimpressed nearly 2,000 years later. But would it not be more Christian to leave Jews alone?
No. It can't be more Christian to keep from someone a very precious truth just because we're afraid of offending them. This could be true of a Gentile as well, who might be offended because I'm going to talk to him about his real need. And he knows he has a need, and Jewish people have a need just the same as anybody else.
Let me concentrate for a moment on the activities of the more conservative or quote-unquote respectable groups, such as the Anglican Church itself, whose synod sponsors the CMJ. CMJ stands for, it used to stand for the Church's mission to the Jews, and now it's been changed to stand for the Church's ministry amongst the Jews. They claim it would be anti-Semitic to deprive us Jews of this marvellous truth which they claim to be an exclusive possession of. I say that this is the greatest form of anti-Semitism. Sir Oswald Mosley was president of the London Mission to the Jews. The archetypal form of such oppressive missionizing was, of course, the Spanish Inquisition. They used to torture us into accepting Christianity. Of course, though, in 15th century Spain, advertising agencies hadn't yet been invented.
It's the Jews for Jesus organization in America that pioneered modern marketing techniques for missionary organizations. Jesus is being sold to the Jewish public under the professional guidance of advertising agencies like the ones used to sell American presidents and market international consumer products. The sheer volume of glossy and carefully worded literature is indicative of the enormous amounts of money being devoted to the conversion of Jews.
How come the Goyim, the Roman Catholics, the Protestants, and whatever, the Greek Orthodox, the Russian Orthodox, how come they have dressed him up in Greco-Roman pagan terms? How come he has just been brought into the Roman world when we know he's the Messiah of Israel?
He seems like he's been very much, it's like taking somebody out of high school who's just been coached very hard and on a particular subject. And he seemed like he's coming out of a lot of matter and a lot of quotations, but he didn't quite know what he was talking about. Basically, I found him a bit ridiculous.
I think it's a pity. It's very hard to describe words, but I think pity is the first word which comes to mind. But with all the problems the Jews have got, we've got these Jews as well. And the thing is, they don't even know what they're talking about.
I think one point comes out very clearly from all the activity that we've seen, and that is that the answer doesn't lie in knowing the arguments better than they do, because all that will happen is they'll come up with a new argument that you've never heard of, and you'll be in trouble. The answer clearly lies in Jewish education.
If I had had an Orthodox Jewish education, I might not be in the same position I'm in today.